You're listening to The Outcue, a 21 News journalist perspective on a top news story.
I'm Assistant News Director Justin Mitchell. This is The Outcue. Thank you for joining us. This week, instead of going over one story exhaustively, it occurs to me that there is a lot happening in one of the counties we cover. Now, to remind you all, we cover in Ohio, Mahoning, Trumbull, and Columbiana counties. We cover Mercer County in Pennsylvania. And it seems like in the past week or so, so much has been happening in Trumbull County. Everything from the good to the bad to the questionable. So with us today to just go over some of those stories and what we've been doing to dive into them are Allie Ross and Leslie Huff. Before we get to them, because there's three different stories that I'm going to touch on, and they're not even all that's going on in Trumbull County. But for one, last week we talked with Robert here about Foxconn, and we were speculating on what their big announcement may be. And we know what that is now, so I'm just going to touch on that personally real quick here. We thought they were going to announce possibly a new vehicle. That is not what happened. Instead, they announced they've sold the plant to some existing partner for upwards of $350 million when you factor in all of the equipment, that it's going to have something to do in the AI field, and that the speculation is that this may be the most jobs that plant maybe has ever held. It's going to use every square foot of this space, which hasn't happened since the heyday of General Motors. And we're still going to keep watching what that might be, because the partner, Crescent Dune LLC, almost nothing is known about them. So that kicked off our week with this big announcement that still leaves us with a lot of questions. We're going to keep working sources. We're going to keep trying to figure out where that may fit in. And even as this is being recorded right now, there's an announcement from Apple this afternoon at 4:30 that sounds like it could factor in, but we don't know. And by the time you see this, you will know if it factors in at all. So we'll probably have to revisit that. But that's enough from me. There's other stories that are less promising, or maybe at least more questionable. One of which, and they're both centered in the city of Warren in Trumbull County. One having to do with an uptick in violence that, Allie, you've been covering this week, and it's certainly nothing new for the city of Warren to see. And Leslie, you've been covering the potential, maybe, reopening of the Insight hospitals that have been closed since March 27th. So, Allie, I'm going to start with you. We had over the weekend several shooting incidents, and you attended a news conference yesterday on Tuesday with the city's mayor and law director, and they're seeking to shut down a convenience mart that they say has been a trouble spot. But you've also spoken to people from the convenience mart, and so let's just talk about that. Where did this all come into being?
Yeah, so like you said, it really started over this weekend. Within 12 hours of each other, there were three different shootings, the last of which was the only deadly shooting that occurred over the weekend. One person was killed and one was injured. And yeah, it happened outside the convenient food mart right on Elm Road in Warren. And, like you said, this has been kind of a questionable spot for law enforcement over the years. Last year, there was an effort in city council trying to encourage the state to revoke the store's liquor license, because people thought maybe that was bringing in some tougher crowds and that was contributing to the problem. The state did ultimately renew that liquor license, and the store actually entered into an agreement with the city to close in certain hours, 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. on the weekends, like right after the bars close, so that hopefully the crowd that was leaving the bars, they wouldn't be tempted to come into Convenient Food Mart and keep drinking and keep partying and get up to no good. So that was part of the agreement. Another part, they were not to sell liquor after hours. And essentially, after this shooting happened, I went before the news conference even happened, and they announced that they were going to seek the shutdown of the store. I went in and talked to some of the managers and talked to the owner on the phone about what had happened over the weekend, and whether they felt they had any responsibility in bringing in the crowds that were getting involved with violence and partying on essentially their doorstep. And essentially what they said is that they felt it was more of a community problem, because they had been following the rules that they had, agreed to with the city. They had been closed that Sunday morning, Saturday night, from 2 to 4 a.m. They hadn't opened until around like 4:35 even, they said. And that's around the time that those people came in. They said they did not sell them alcohol. They were out gambling in the parking lot. That's what they said they saw on the surveillance cameras. And we also talked to witnesses who said the same thing. That news conference rolls around the next day, and what the city says is that they have clear evidence that the store was breaking their agreement, that they were operating in the hours they weren't supposed to, that they were selling liquor when they weren't supposed to. They didn't say, the city, whether that included liquor being sold to the people who were specifically involved in the shooting. So we still don't know that. But essentially, they said that the convenient food mart ownership and managers have been lying to the people of Warren and to the city about what they've been up to. And they said that after, some years of incidents, and they've racked up a lot of liquor license violations, essentially that enough was enough for them. The store still does deny that they've broken any of that, the law or their agreement. So really it'll come down to when they go to the courts to try to get this place shut down. Do they have the evidence?
And at this point, they have yet, as of this recording, they have not gone to court yet and filed anything.
No. Yeah.
And this is an interesting, and I'm glad that you mentioned that you went to the store and talked to these people, because this is a very difficult line to walk. When there's crime and it's in the vicinity of something, how do you prove that it's that business's fault versus they're trying to operate a business and maybe they're the victims too? And that remains to be seen. They do have liquor license violations. I believe we counted 21 over the course of the past almost 30 years, so not all in one year or anything. But, it is sometimes possible that just by proximity you're pulled in. The city says no. I think Enzo Cantala Mesas' quote was, "It's a little bit like playing whack-a-mole, but we'll whack every mole."
Yeah.
But what's the mole? Is it the business or is it the people that are there? Because we look at the daily reports from Warren. We've done stories on Warren crime for years and years. Neighborhoods are racked with gunfire on a fairly regular basis. And that doesn't necessarily mean every house that's in the vicinity is the problem. So they're going to need to come up with the actual evidence.
Yeah, and I do know Warren's city prosecutor, Tracy Timko, she did say in that news conference, we don't go after businesses that just have a homicide outside on the sidewalk. There has to be something else. At least that's what they're saying right now. Again, we haven't seen that evidence, but it seems to be that they have a clear indication that the store was abetting illegal behavior or something along those lines. It would have to be something pretty serious to shut them down completely.
What would you say the mood was like or the general demeanor of the manager at the store that you spoke to? I mean, were they sort of defiant, or were they more like, listen, this is a problem that we think needs solved too, we're not the bad guys?
It was a little bit of both. They were definitely very insistent that it was not the truth, what the city was saying. I spoke with the employee who was working the morning that the shooting happened, and she was angry. She said the prosecutor told blatant lies to the city of Warren about her employer. I spoke with the owner over the phone. He's actually out in the Middle East right now with family in Jerusalem. And he was like, I would like to see what evidence they have, for them to say they have clear evidence that we broke the agreement. I don't know what they're talking about. And he was very clear that this is not true. It was a little bit of anger there. But, they also wanted to make it very clear that they care about the community, that they see it as a community problem that they want to be addressed. They just don't feel that it is their responsibility.
And the reason that, and there's a weave I'm going to make as we move over to Leslie now, is that while these two stories seem like they have almost nothing to do with each other, the thing they do have in common is you have to question everybody involved and not just take one person at face value. The city held a news conference. They made very specific claims. A lot of news organizations would cover that and simply say, mayor says this has to happen, law director says this has to happen, prosecutor says this, and you just take those authority figures at face value. But we hold the authority figures accountable too, and as it stands, they say they have evidence. We haven't seen the evidence, so we don't know who to believe. So we present all of that. I'm not sure, I have not reviewed all of the coverage from every other outlet, but I don't know that everybody went and talked to this store. And I think it's important that we do that, because they do have a valid point here until they don't. Innocent until proven guilty, I suppose. And along those lines is where you get into the Insight Hospital, where I definitely saw a lot of coverage that basically tentatively celebrated that after having been closed abruptly on March 27th until now, with almost no information trickling out, that all of a sudden the Insight Hospital people come to town and say that they plan to reopen, starting with the emergency room at Trumbull Regional, in the coming weeks. I mean, obviously everybody wants the hospitals reopened, but Leslie, did they have any concrete specifics on how they're in a better position now than they were, say, last week?
No, not at all.
In a
And
word,
so
right.
I feel like it was made clear to me as soon as the meeting started, because he did a PowerPoint presentation, Dr. Jawad Shah, and he went back into the history of Insight. And I thought to myself, all right, he came all the way to Ohio, and this is what you're starting off with when there are so many people in the crowd trying to, figure out what's going to happen next, and then we have to wait, so long before you get to what's moving forward.
How far back do they go? I knew this at one point.
It's a great question. I don't know.
That's all right. Since you said the history, it just...
Yeah, well, I guess the history is starting in Chicago. But,
okay.
Yeah, so, and then he listed off the accomplishments that the company has seen, and including Trumbull Regional, and what happened when it was opened, when they were owners of it at that point. And so I just thought to myself, all right, that's nice, but I mean, all of these accomplishments, what do they do for us when the hospital is still closed? You still don't have any idea on when it will open. You just keep saying, moving forward, we want it to be open in several weeks. And then even Commissioner Tony Bernard, he said, well, does that mean 4 weeks, 10 weeks, what? And he's like, well, no, we can't say. And so he even said, could it be months? And Dr. Shaw said, no, not months. So it's just like, what's the timeline here? I don't know.
And then Shaw sat down one-on-one with Caitlin McCarthy after the meeting and openly said, oh no, if we don't have the workforce, we can't reopen.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And he has no idea if they have the workforce. He's just hopeful.
Yeah.
So it leaves you wondering, like, okay, everybody's optimistic to get the hospital reopened, but that's what this was today, to just come and say, okay, we hope we can do it now. We hoped you could have kept it open. You know?
Yeah. And when it comes to employment, that's what people were asking about, because the nurses union, they're not happy with what's been going on with Insight, because
and they had been optimistic at one point too, so that has changed.
Yeah, completely changed now. They're just like, we don't even think it's gonna reopen. Also, they don't know if their employees would want to come back, because they just don't trust Insight at all at this point. There's no vacation pay. They haven't been paid their vacation yet.
But they were already owed.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. So there's just a lot of factors here that the unions believe Insight's just not being transparent enough or forthcoming.
Well, and I would go even further. Shaw, in that one-on-one interview, we asked him, for instance, about why the company has been so silent and not giving the community any answers.
Good question.
And he said things like, well, the procedures for taking over a hospital are out there. They're available to anybody who wants them. I've read these kinds of filings and things in the bankruptcy court and regulatory filings. I process information for a living, as you guys do. That's dense and difficult reading. The average layperson does not know where to find it or how to understand it. So that was a weak answer. And then he said, well, I don't know what you've done to try and get a hold of us. And we had to lay out to him, okay, well, we called your corporate office and we're told that you are not reachable anywhere by phone.
Yeah.
We were given an email address for an executive who, when she finally did start responding, only gave me a number for her just yesterday, but had declined to do so prior. And the director of government operations is a guy named Dane Walling, the former mayor of Flint, Michigan. And he had outright ignored us. I have emailed him, I have called him, I have texted him, and at some point the texts were outright almost pleading, saying this community deserves some answers here. You've left them hurting. Can we explain something? And he has ignored every one of them. And when we explained all of that, that's where Shaw fell back to, well, we didn't realize we had a messaging problem.
Yeah.
And then it gets worse. We asked about medical records, because we've gotten calls from people saying that they want access to their medical records and they can't get them. And they were directed to a message that still to this day sits on Trumbull Regional's website saying how to get them. And it's an Insight number and it's an Insight email. But yesterday, Shaw said we couldn't give them that answer because Steward still has those records. Well, which is it? They cannot both be true at the same time.
No.
So the messaging not only did it not get more clear yesterday, it got less clear.
Yeah. What blew my mind, going back to the employment, is apparently the nurses union and Insight, they haven't been in close communication. They have, but it's just like something's broken there.
They've had some meetings, but they've been by phone mostly. I think there was one session in the hospital.
Yes. And so Shaw says, he's confident, I guess, that they will have employees will come back to the hospital,
There's a shortage of healthcare workers, so they don't just need some to come back. For that hospital to function, they would need all of them to come back, is what Tom Connolly said. And that seems like a very tall order to fill when this has been since March 27th. We know for a fact some have gotten other jobs because we've covered the job fairs where they were going to get other jobs.
Right. Very true.
So I say all of this because if we just covered that the way apparently a lot of media did, then the headline on it would be that Insight's finally ready to reopen. I didn't even see anybody else point out that they told the union they were going to reopen starting with the emergency room by June 1st. And that date came and went and they never had a word to say about it.
Right.
So the question is not, we want to trust Insight. Everybody wants to trust Insight. We want the hospital reopened and they're the owners right now. But they've given us nothing.
He was dancing around a lot of questions yesterday, especially when it comes to finances.
Yes, and another key question is they don't own the real estate. That's still owned by Medical Properties Trust.
But they're trying to take that ownership.
Right, but we asked him about that yesterday, and he said, listen, we've been working well with MPT, and we think that they want this hospital to succeed too, which is probably true, but that's not an answer. And there was an article out just yesterday by Motley Fool that said that Medical Properties Trust is finally beginning to recover as a company from its time with Stewart. And the reason they're doing it is because of steadily rising rents on new tenants. So our question was, are you going to be able to keep up with steadily rising rent when you don't hold those cards? And his best answer was, yeah, we've been talking to them. We think we've got a good relationship. But there was nothing in writing. There's nothing but we're talking and Jawad Shah trusts the MPT people. The commissioners trust Jawad Shah. Everybody trusts everybody. But so far, all we've seen are broken promises. So I say all of that because it's important to go beyond the news conference or the news release or the police report. And that's what these two stories have in common. That's what Foxconn has in common too. Foxconn's making big promises around the country and potentially here. So you got to go digging for the answers. Either one of you or both of you, just talk a little bit about why whenever you're given an assignment and it's like, okay, this is the basic premise, how you've got to go deeper than just that top line on it.
I think because people's lives are, depend on certain things. This is the hospital that we're talking about. The community needs the hospital. There are jobs that are involved, or people with jobs that are involved who may have to come back or may not want to come back, or just want to, just want their pay, anything, just their livelihood to kind of go back to normal or see what's going on. So it's important for us to make sure that we get the deeper answers for them.
Plus, we have one hospital in Warren, so it's not as though they're a complete hospital desert, but if they had a population that was relying on two hospitals and now there's one, then you have a healthcare issue.
On top of that, we're getting more businesses coming to Trumbull County.
Yes,
like Kimberly
there's a
Park.
boom,
So,
right. There is a boom in Trumbull County.
There's a lot of things that you have to consider.
Yeah, and along similar lines with crime in Warren. I mean, this is a community where people live and they want it to be safe. The crime numbers are not just statistics. It's not just, a number of people who have been shot or killed. They're real people with real identities who are, their deaths or their injuries impact the people around them. And so investigating not only when a crime takes place, but the deeper why as to what are the factors going into potentially these crimes happening. Is it dislocation? Are they encouraging the lawless behavior as the city says, or the larger community problems? In that news conference, they did focus a lot on the shutdown of the convenience store, but I also did ask them, what are your long-term solutions? Because that whack-a-mole quote that you brought up earlier, that really was pertaining to the fact that they've had issues with different businesses in the past past, and they've shut down different places or put different rules in place, and the same kind of crowd that gets up to the same kind of stuff moves from place to place. So they're saying, well, we know we're playing whack-a-mole, but we're going to keep whacking the moles. At a certain point, you got to unplug the game, you know,
Exactly.
and
That's a
and
great way to
solve
put
the
it.
more structural issues. And to their credit, they answered that question. They said they're trying to, you know, build up employment opportunities, and they said young people also have to be responsible for their own choices, which, you know, is a fair point. But yeah, getting into that why of it all and not just focusing on the what, that's also something that definitely drives the angle in a lot of the stories.
And telling young people that they need to be responsible for their choices is something that young people realize when they're no longer young people, if they make it to that point. So you do have some societal responsibility to think of something innovative that can be done. And look, there's no easy answers, but if you keep playing whack-a-mole, you could end up shutting down every convenience store in the city and then have a bunch of house parties and you haven't solved the problem. So yes, what is, you know, how do you unplug the game, right? Another story that neither of you have worked directly on, I don't believe, but it's just another Trumbull County story that I'm only mentioning because there's a development sort of today, is that there's a problem with human trafficking in Trumbull County. They just today, there were superseding indictments for people related to a spa called, it was Tiger Spa, I think was the name of it. And they've indicted more people. And the accusation there is that they were keeping women for up to 3 months in the building against their will and forcing them to perform sex acts. It's a serious issue. And I mention that because that's heating up. It's a problem everywhere, but it's heating up a lot in Trumbull County because, as we've reported and broken, one of the spas that was shut down, there's a woman under indictment named Furong Lee who was operating, allegedly, a human trafficking operation out of a building that is owned by Trumbull County Commissioner Rick Hernandez. And since we've last spoken here, the Human Trafficking Task Force has served a warrant on Hernandez and seized his phone. Now, I have to be abundantly clear, we do not know that that's evidence of anything other than that there's an ongoing investigation, but it's another thing in the backdrop of Trumbull County where you have this dichotomy where you've got these stories, you have crime in Warren, you have the question about the hospital, but you also have this big Foxconn announcement with more likely coming there. You have Kimberly Clark coming. You have, still the TJX warehouse. There's an Amazon warehouse coming to Trumbull County. Trumbull County is situated to do big things and really be a major driver for the future of this valley. But these kinds of problems are the kinds of things that derail big, big good news. We're on the precipice of a lot of good things. And that's where it comes back to our role and why we're talking about these things here. You can blindly follow off of a cliff. If they say good things are happening, great, question it. If they say it's all bad, great, look for solutions. Our role is to do more than regurgitate what the powers that be say, whether they're saying good things or bad things. And I think that even though these are all things that seem like they have no direct connection, that's the through line that runs through them, is there are people in power who are telling you things good and bad, and they want you to just accept it without question. And that would be a disservice to you, the viewer. That's why we do what we do. That is essentially the purpose of journalism, and that's the level that we try and take it to here. And so you've heard me make comments on this podcast before that sound like they're vaguely critical of other outlets. And I'm not going to name other outlets and say that, but yes, I am critical of journalistic outlets that just regurgitate what they're told by the powers that be. The powers that be have their own interests that are supposed to include looking out for you, but they don't always. So somebody has to keep them honest, as well as try and promote the good and try and look for answers for the bad. That's what this job of ours is all about, and that's why we do this podcast, that's why we do what we do, and that's why we ask you to click like and subscribe to this podcast and all of our other podcasts. Follow our YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook, download our app, but also reach out to us. We can only do what we can do if you tell us what's going on in your community that matters to you. You can reach us at news@wfmj.com, watchdog@wfmj.com. You can message us on Facebook Messenger or on Blue Sky, and you can always call us at 330-744-8821. Until next time, this has been the Outcue.